Hi everyone, I'm here now to present Odessa by the Bee Gees, their masterpiece. I hope you come to understand that it really was an era-defining album. It was a masterpiece by any band's standards. First song is called Odessa, City by the Black Sea. They're singing about Odessa in the Ukraine, about a lost ship. What's interesting about that is there's a parallel between that story and the anthem for the country from where they came from. The song is called Ellen Vannon, and they recorded that initially in 1968, but remained rare for about 30 years. The ship, it sunk. They both sunk. And what's interesting is they never revisited the Isle of Man until 1974, when they were in their late 20s. But initially they left when they were well under 10 years of age, and they went to live in Australia. Well, actually in Manchester, England, and then in Australia. But they actually were born in the Isle of Man. So it's interesting that they were bringing out their subconscious minds. They were writing about their home country and their yearning to go back there, even though that wasn't going to happen for another 5 years. Originally, it was written to be set in 1866, and the name of the ship was going to be the Dutch ship Anne Strauss. Ended up being 1890, the British ship Veronica. On the bonus disc, you get the demo version. This is what the third disc looks like, and it's really beautifully done, like chamber music with nice flamenco guitar, a lot of echo, all the orchestra instruments. Sounds like a concerto. It highlights the acoustic sound. I love the mono mix as well, because it really centers every instrument to the point that there is extra clarity on it. I really love that about the mono mixes on this album. The next song is my undiscovered gem of the Bee Gees. I would pick this song to be the most undiscovered and best song on the album. Bee Gees are a band who, on every album, they have at least one song that I believe could be a hit again today if it were to be released. They just have so many killer songs. This song, and you can hear it now, it shows a more darker side of the Bee Gees. It's the dark psychedelic side of the Bee Gees, and it's about dark unfulfilled romance, and it sounds like Neil Diamond, but with strings added, and it gives it that extra musical story landscape dimension, similar to the Moody Blues. Track number 3 is Black Diamond. Black Diamond is, I don't really get what the lyrics are. I think what they're about, some black crystals that send Robin like a portal to another dimension. It's an alternative reality making you die in this one. A reality Robin desperately hopes will reunite him with his woman. So there you go. The song has got an amazing bass that really spices up the track and gives it that extra psychedelic dimension. And it does remind me a lot of the Byrds. So bands like the Seekers were pure folk, or Mamas and the Papas, and added with someone like Jefferson Airplane. Marley Per Drive is country music from the deep south in the US. As per The Weight by the band started out as Bob Dylan's band when he went electric in 1967. And that song really owes a lot to The Weight by the band. It moves away from the cheesy country pop music from the 50s and early 60s. Hi Maggie, how are ya? Oh, there's my Maggie here. Oh. Oh, hello Maggie, she's coming to visit and say hello. Don't wag your tail in my face. We'll see what this book has to say also about Marley Per Drive. It's the most interesting song. Marley Per Drive is Barry's and Colin's homage to the bands of the Wait. Oh my god, I haven't even read that, and I already knew that. It's a remarkably whimsical collaboration between Barry and Robin, given the circumstances. And I'll get more into what that's talking about in a moment. It's a very tense period for the band, for the Bee Gees, Barry and Robin. The song features the drum opening, cadence, vocal patterns, and melody of the Wait. Barry enlisted soulful picker Bill Keefe, who played banjo for Neil Young. But for that rootsy feel, Barry performs an able impression of Rick Danko, one of the band's 4 lead singers. The lyrics, another of Barry's nursery rhyme sagas with an O. Henry ending, are beyond idiocy. Yeah, I think it's got like a really crazy children's song lyric, but it works because this album is so full of variety, always pervading this, seems to pervade the darkness that seems to pervade every aspect of this album. So it's a very welcome song. It was actually also on a compilation circa about 2005, on an Australian compilation that featured great Australian legends like Paul Kelly and other folk artists of great Australian music heritage. Okay, next, Edison. Edison is an amazing song. The demo version is probably not as good. What I like is you can hear how they started the song and where they ended up. The studio sophistication, the trickery they used in the studio really enabled the song to be one of the best of all time. If your hairs on your neck don't stand, then go to the doctor and see if you're still living, if you're still breathing. I mean, I think the whole idea was to give that haunting feel as if Edison was actually present in the recording, I strongly suspect. Edison reminds me of an Israeli physicist in the 1970s by the name of Itzhak Ben-Tov. He predicted that people are going to keep getting smarter and smarter. He drew graphs based on the data that he had, showing that people from 50 years are only average today. And he also predicted that the average people today will only be the average in another 100 years. Only future history will tell, of course. But it really stirs that question, the song, are we getting any smarter? Where are all the Edisons, you know? Edison is here to stay. It keeps asserting. So Odessa addresses the question if we are getting any smarter. The world indeed is superseded with the brilliant minds like Edison. Perhaps not yet. Next is Melody Fair. Melody Fair reminds that this is actually the first Bee Gees album to feature heavily in a film. 2 years later, there was a film called Melody in 1971, and Melody Fair was one of those songs. It was covered by Lulu, and Lulu covered about 12 Bee Gees songs in her career. I think only half of them were released, except for Rarities collections. And yeah, she had a thing for Bee Gees songs, but that shouldn't be a surprise because she was married to Morris between 1968, I think, and 1973. So I like the way she does the song too, by the way. And Bee Gees do it very similarly, very lush and evergreen ballad. Gives a nice little break from the heaviness that's generally, weighted on this album. That film is really interesting because it stars Mark Lester, who, about a couple of decades later became godfather to all 3 of Michael Jackson's children. And it's similar to Harold and Maude, you may have heard of. If you're a Cat Stevens fan, you'd know Harold and Maude, where Cat Stevens provided the soundtrack. This is a very similar movie where the children get to have the point of view in the movie. The main protagonists are children, and it happens to be about a romance between 2 preteens. So, You can't get more politically incorrect by today's standards, I don't think. They'd never make a movie like that now. The next song, oh my God, is Suddenly. Suddenly, track number 7 is also similar to track number 11, Give Your Best. Give Your Best is also in the movie Melody, and I love the way it brightens up the mood in the film. It's an Irish trad song with fiddles and fast folk dances, music in the traditional pre-rock and roll dance style. It's also Morris's or Mo's first lead song, first lead vocal. And I love the bass psychedelic effect intro that Morris introduces. So what he's doing is he's sharpening a note and thus creating a psychedelic effect that leads into this Irish trad song. I mean, that's just, such a throwback to the White Album, where you have something as avant-garde as Revolution number 9 leading you into Good Night, a schmaltzy rock and roll cabaret number, So it tends to mess with your brain and forces you to expect nothing at all from this album, just like the cover. You'll never be disappointed in this album if you don't have a very high expectation of it, especially. The next song, and by the way, you can hear Edison I was just talking about. Very interesting demo recording here. The next song is Whisper Whisper. Shows the real funky side of the Bee Gees, many years before they started their disco period. Especially, it's evident on the encore. It reminds of the funk fusion in the band Blood, Sweat and Tears. Yeah, so it's very funky. It's actually very much like something like Bulldog by the Beatles, but in the encore, it just goes full-on progressive funk fusion. Gotta check that song out. Next is Lamplight. That is perhaps the most historic song on the album. For one very simple reason. It broke up the band. It's the song that broke up Robin and Barry. So what happened was when Robin found out that the record company, Polydor Records in England, and it was Atco in the US, and Spin Records in Australia, when they decided to go with Barry's lead single, 1st of May, it really angered Robin. Robin really had a thing for his song Lamplight. And he was furious. He took it out on Barry and Robert Stigwood. Robert later denied he had anything to do with that decision. In fact, he encouraged Robin all along with that song and really expressed much appreciation for the title track, Odessa, as well, which was Robin's. Robert was their best friend when it comes to their career. Barry returning that love through his song To Love Somebody. So in fact, To Love Somebody on their first album was actually written about and to Robert Stigwood, not to a woman. By the way, you can hear a later demo version of Edison again now. Actually, originally it was titled Barbara. Their mother's called Barbara. Barbara Came to Stay. Then they changed it to Edison and completely changed the whole axis of the song. All right, next we've got Sound of Love. Sound of Love is one of the most thought-provoking lyrics I have ever seen in any song. I love the irony in it too. It basically talks of seeing children playing happily, and even an old crippled man is happy. But the protagonist can't be happy until he finds the sound of love. Could that be about Barry? Could that be about wanting to write the perfect love tune, which we know he always tries to write the best song he's ever written? Or perhaps he's just wanting a romance so badly that he thinks he cannot be happy without it. Either way, it is thought-provoking and it centers around desire, the theme of desire, attachment, and unconditional happiness, like what meditation practices promise to attain. Next, C Symphony. The idea of bracketing the end of sides with orchestra pieces was to make this album sound like an opus. Each side on record 2 ends with an orchestral track Not to mention the opening track, Odessa, also has a strong orchestral flavour. I think this album is up there with any of the best rock albums, as well as classical works from previous centuries. By the way, Morris would play a demo of each orchestral track and give it to Bill Shepherd, who would create the arrangement from large orchestras who recorded these tracks. And it's all on this as well, the original piano demos. Then there's the next orchestral track, With All Nations. That ends side 3. It's also dubbed the international anthem. It's a nod to peace and a one world global community, perfectly timed with the first man landing on the moon and the first pictures of Earth from space. In fact, this album comes out about 6 months after the first pictures from space of Earth get released, and about 3 months before the first landing on the moon. And that engenders a sense of a one world, we're all in it together. Next, I Laugh in Your Face. As the title suggests, it's not a very serious song. It gives the seriousness and tension of the album a bit of a break. It is seriously sad in the verse, but builds towards a chorus that is pompous, like a football anthem. In fact, we had a football anthem in the 70s here in Australia called Up There Kazali, and that reminds me a lot of this song. In fact, it was written by another 60s legend here in Australia by the name of Phil Brady, and he no doubt would have rubbed shoulders with the Bee Gees on bandstand and in the studio when they were recording as kids. It's really tongue-in-cheek and it's a bit of sensational fun. Then we've got track 15, Never Say Never. Another song that stirred a fight between, you guessed it, Barry and Robin. Robin insisted on the line, I declared war on Spain. In fact, it was the genesis of the song, but Barry didn't like it. Barry's a more romantic type and did not easily understand Robin's eccentric interest, the royal heritage of his song. Then at track 16 is the lead single. I've mentioned it before, 1st of May. 1st of May, sung of course by Barry, hence why the tension. The song is simply about the love of a boy that he has for his dog. It's a very straightforward song, in stark contrast to the songs about flock intelligence, lost ships, and interdimensional portals. It's an ideal song at Christmas time or something like that. It's a very kid and family friendly song, and it was the main hit single. And finally, we have the British opera. Combining popular and classical music was as far out as you can get in 1969. It was a time for embracing the creative human spirit. In prior decades, music was all formulaic and pedestrian. Now, music was eclectic, globally fused with a taste of the postmodern world that was to come in the next century. You can hear the genesis of our global culture in other bands as well, like Love's Forever Changes, Jefferson Airplane, Surrealistic Pillow, The Beach Boys Smile, and Iron Butterflies, Inagada da Vida. Anyway, I hope you got something from this album. And before I close up, here's another quote from this great 1970s Bee Gees book that I've had most of my life. Despite everything, Odessa was a remarkable achievement. The production was the best the Bee Gees had managed so far, and it was considerably more sophisticated than the work of the first 3 albums. Boy, is that an understatement. The title track, done mostly by Robin, remains one of the group's most important works, one of the prettiest tunes they've ever written. Melody Fair became the title track for a movie, Melody, and also scored a #1 hit in Japan. And so there you have it. That's the Bee Gees' Odessa. It's a masterpiece. It's going to be listened to and talked about long after we're all dead. So the chart of the 1001 albums you must listen to before you die, and it's also in the Rolling Stone Top 500. Check it out. Thank you for watching my video. And don't forget to subscribe.